You know, folks, I realize that the term gaslighting gets thrown around a whole lot. Hell, I even put it on a shirt. I refuse to be gaslit. But if you think that we've been gaslit in the past, I really hate to tell you all this, it's going to get way, way worse. We are going to be gaslit on a level like we have never experienced in our lives because this Joe Biden cancer diagnosis is exactly what MAGA and Donald Trump and this administration needed so desperately. They needed something else to talk about because people were really starting to wake up to the fact that we have a man who is governing like a dictator. We have a man who is ignoring every court in the land. He's ignoring the Supreme Court. He's having mayors and judges and congresswomen arrested. He's weaponizing the government against everyone who disagrees with him. He is absolutely brick by brick taking down the foundation of our country. So what do? They're going to use this moment to capitalize. And every time we say anything about what's going on, but what did they know when Joe Biden was in office? Who was really running the show? And my son, my youngest son, will grow up and he will watch political debates, and there will be somebody still tied to the Biden administration somehow, and someone will be saying, yeah, but what did you know all those years ago and what did you keep hidden? Trust me, folks, this one ain't going away. J.D. Vance was asked about Biden's diagnosis, and he went straight for it. He went straight for it. Watch what an asshole of a vice president we have right here.
Joe Biden, sir, do you have any thoughts on his diagnosis?
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, of course, we wish the best for the former president's health. And, you know, it sounds pretty serious, but hopefully he makes the right recovery. Like, I will say, whether the right time to have this conversation is now or at some point in the future, we really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. And that's no... You know, that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him. And why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff. And this is the guy who carries around the nuclear football for the world's largest nuclear arsenal. This is not child's play, and we can pray for good health, but also recognize that if you're not in good enough health to do the job, you shouldn't be doing the job.
All right, folks, there is a whole lot to unpack there. First of all, he says that he doesn't think that Joe Biden was capable of doing the job. I can tell you right straight up front right now that Donald Trump is not capable of being president, and I know that because he had to have and had to ask for immunity in order to be able to do his job. And if you have to have all of the rules and all of the checks and balances taken out of place so you can do your job, then you can't do your job. And I've said this many times here on the channel, but go to your work, wherever it is that you work. Walk in, tell them you want to do away with the rule book. You need immunity in order to be able to do your job, and go into your department and do it however you see fit. Walk all over top of everyone there, push everyone around, and see how far it gets you. You won't get very far. If you have to have immunity in order to be able to do your job, then you're not able to do your job. And then he wants to talk about, well, the American people needed to have a better understanding of what was going on. They needed to have a better understanding of Joe Biden's medical condition. I think the American people needed to have a better understanding of the Constitution of the United States. I think the American people should have been better educated on how the government is supposed to work and what role the president is supposed to play. I think that's where we could start with people understanding stuff. They're going to go back, they're going to use this and milk this all into the ground because they need a distraction. And that is what they're doing. And he wants to say that I blame him. He blames Joe Biden. Well, I blame Donald Trump for a whole lot. I blame him for the level of cruelty that he has brought back and exposed and allowed people to be and empowered people to be. I blame Donald Trump for January 6th, and I will never stop talking about it. As long as there's a breath in my body, I'm always going to keep pointing that day out. You can talk all day long. Me and a friend was talking about how that, George W. Bush was a terrible president. He truly was. That was a terrible 8 years. And those 8 years of George W. Bush was worse than Trump's first term. But this now, what we have seen over the last 4 years and going into this term here, what we have seen this country become and what we have seen them do is something I will always blame Donald Trump with. And if we want to have the conversation about Joe Biden's health, I'll be more than happy to have that conversation whenever we're ready to face the conversation that we now have a man governing as a dictator. We now have a man who's trying to tear down brick by brick everything we were ever founded on. We have a man who was a 34-time convicted felon found liable of sexual abuse, who defamed the victim later and who led an insurrection on our country. We have that man in charge and telling us that he's the one suddenly finding the fraud. I say that we've got Jesse James now working for the railroad, and he's telling us about all the fraud he's found in the railroad. I feel like we have Bonnie and Clyde now that have suddenly become bankers, and they're telling us all about the corruption that's in the bank. But if you really want to have the discussion about Joe Biden and decline and his condition, do you really want to have that conversation when you got the guy that rambles on all day about batteries and sharks, when you got the guy who talks about Hannibal Lecter, when you got the guy who thought that Mattel was a country? I could sit here all day long and we could go down the long list of huge gaffes and insane things that Donald Trump says on a daily basis, and they always give him a pass. Donald Trump is the most pampered person ever, and the mainstream media has always used Joe Biden as a distraction from what Donald Trump was actually doing, and they've always held Joe Biden to an account. I've never seen anyone who has been held to more scrutiny and more of an account, and every word has been, they wait on every single word, and if he takes one small hesitation before he speaks, it makes every headline. Biden stuttered. Biden paused. Biden thought before he spoke. Now let's go over here to this Trump rally where he talks about a battery and a shark. It's gaslighting. That's what it is. It straight up is. And this, as bad as I hate to say it, and I really hate saying this was exactly what this administration needed. Because when we try to talk about how that he's arresting judges and mayors and congresswomen, when we try to talk about how he's ignoring every rule in the book, how he's ignoring the Supreme Court, how he's completely shredding our Constitution, when he's sending people out of the country with no due process, every conversation that we've been trying to have to hold him accountable is now going to be shifted back to their favorite boogeyman, Joe Biden's health. That's where we're headed, folks. And that's why that in the coming years, and like I said, this one's not going away. In the coming years, we're really going to have to keep our heads on straight and remember everything that happened. And I will be willing to sit down here with my notepad and I will take notes and I will remind everyone of everything that happened along the way with Donald Trump. They didn't have the decency, and they don't have any, by the way, but they didn't have the decency to just wish Biden well. Just say, you know what, politics aside, we don't wish that on anyone. We hope the former president gets better. Now we have work to do. That's what a normal administration would have done. One that was actually doing its job effectively would have just simply said, I guarantee you, if the roles were reversed, and this was Joe Biden in his second term, and let's say that he was perfectly healthy and he's in his second term, and let's say this happened to Donald Trump, I guarantee you Joe Biden would have came out and said, we wish him the best, we're going to put politics aside. That would have been the end of it. Joe Biden would have continued to govern within the rules of the government. He wouldn't have needed immunity. He wouldn't have needed every court in the land to just turn a blind eye to everything he was doing. He would have rolled up his sleeves and kept working. But this is going to be a constant media circus. Because think about it. Once Joe Biden was gone, what were they going to talk about? They were going to have to face the music and they were going to have to finally hold Donald Trump accountable. And now they've got their out. Now they have all got their out. And we cannot let them rewrite history this way. I just refuse. As long as I have a platform and as long as I have a voice, I will be calling this shit out. Because I can't believe we live in a world where we hold one man to such scrutiny and such an account, while the other guy just absolutely slings shit in every direction. And somehow it's always okay for that dude because we got to talk about this guy's stutter. And now we're going to sit and talk about this man's cancer. While he suffers and while he faces such a difficult time, and while his family faces such a difficult time, it's going to be right back in the news because that's just the kind of vultures that MAGA is. And they're desperate because, truthfully, they cannot defend Donald Trump and his actions. Truthfully, they can't. So they have to have a distraction. They have to have something else to talk about. And unfortunately, they got it.